Perfect. Over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone. As Matt said, I started here in February, and I think things have gone well so far. All right. We'll find out after this. But the purpose of this is just to, I guess, a bit of an introduction to myself, where I've come from, my background, and my research area. The staff I have met, and I've had conversations with all staff, but PhD students, maybe a few of you, but not all of you. So this will be good for you as well. Now, I do move around a lot while I talk, and I talk with my hands, and I get excited, but I don't have a slide changer, so I'm kind of tethered to this. See how that goes as we move forward. All right. So here's our plan of action. So as any coach has, you've always got your plan, and you got to stick to it. So I'm going to start off going through a bit of a background about myself, how I got to being here at Trobe. Then what I thought I would do was highlight 4 current projects that I'm working on, and then open up for questions and discussions. But as always, if there's anything you want to say, just yell it out. Don't even raise your hand. I'm informal like that. Okay, so if we go through my journey, early days, so I'm from the US. So I grew up in the northeast part in the state of Connecticut, not far from where Claire is from in Montreal, about 3.5 hours south of there, in the northeast in a small town called Old Sabre, Connecticut. In the summer, it's beautiful. It looks like this. Into winter, it's absolutely miserable, and it looks like this. And I always say to my wife, my wife is from Australia. She's from a small town in the central west of New South Wales called Cowra. There is absolutely nothing going on there. What's that?
The great wine show.
All right, the wine show. There we go. But we moved to Australia. You'll see in a few slides in 2009, and we could have moved to anywhere. But I moved to Ballarat, which doesn't look too far off there. I was talking to my dad this morning on my drive in, and I did say that. I said, I don't know why I live where I live right now, when I drive 2 hours to work and it's cold. But a great place to grow up. I was a very average athlete, grew up playing American football, baseball, and basketball. And I knew at a very young age that the only thing I legitimately cared about was sports. And now it's literally just family, work, and sports is all I care about. I have 0 other interests. So when I finished year 12, I went on and I did an undergraduate degree in physical education and coaching at Springfield College. Fun fact, that's where basketball was invented. So that's where Dr. James Naismith hung the peach baskets. I used to have my undergrad classes on the first basketball court ever. So Springfield College is a YMCA college. You can only study sport-related degrees there. Right? You're not going there to study regular business. It has to be sport business. And things like that. So it's a long, proud history of producing phenomenal coaches and practitioners all around sports. So I did that. So then I was a PE teacher and a coach at a high school back home. So I coached baseball, American football, and basketball, and coached taught physical education. And at the time, that was my dream job. That's what I always wanted to do. That was me. But I started spending a lot of time in weight rooms with young athletes, anywhere from year 7 to year 12, because over in the US, I remember the high school football coach came to me when I was in year 7 and was like, if you want to play football, get into a weight room. So you get them in early and you start working them through. But as a PE teacher, I was in charge of the weight room and in charge of prescribing resistance training to young athletes. And I quickly realized that a PE degree gave me just enough knowledge to be really dangerous in that area. So I thought to myself, I'm tired of year 7 and 8 boys whose sole purpose was to make my life miserable as a PE teacher. And I really liked being in the weight room. So then I went and did a master's degree in human performance and worked as a strength and conditioning coach for women's basketball at a Division II university in the US. I worked in a lab, a human performance lab. I worked as a coach and I did some teaching. So I had like the perfect blend of everything. I got inducted to research. I was still doing my coaching and I was still doing my teaching. My master's thesis, you can't really read it there, but what we did is I was working with the American football team, and their coach wanted to change the style of play that they had. They were used to like This won't make sense to you unless you follow American football. Anybody? Yes. All right. So their style of play was always what we would call 3 yards and a cloud of dust. You hand the ball to the biggest person possible. They run ahead until they get tackled. It looks like a rugby game, but they wanted to spread the field and become faster. But the players that they were recruiting were not built for that. So my job was to go through and assess the body composition of all the players that they had, and try to come up with ways that they can reduce body mass while maintaining muscle mass to suit their style of play. So, back then I was doing a lot of skin folds on large human beings that weigh, in pounds, they weigh 315 pounds. It's like 150 kilos. So large, lots of pinching of fats. So that's what I did for my master's thesis. Following that, so that was 2009. I finished that and I moved over to Australia. And I moved to Ballarat to do my PhD with Warren Young. So Warren Young, if you've been involved or read sports science, a lot of agility work, a lot of strength and power work. His PhD and his areas of research early on are very similar to what Locke does now with his strength diagnostics area. My PhD was in complex training and contrast training, so using heavier loads to potentiate power in football players. So lots of heavy squats and lots of jumps on force plates over that time. Then following that, I did a postdoc at ACRISP. So I believe it was actually here, wasn't it? It was here afterwards. The Australian Centre for Research in Injury in Sport and its Prevention. I worked with under Professor Caroline Finch. And basically that research center was a bunch of epidemiologists that did a lot of stats and then tried to tell coaches what to do. And they kind of quickly realized that coaches and epidemiologists speak 2 different languages. So my job was to kind of go into the middle and translate what they did and put it into coach language, so then coaches could understand why they wanted to implement certain training activities to reduce the risk of injuries in the players that they were coaching. Now, following that, I went back over to the US for 12 months, had a job over there, and then quickly came back. And it's a long story that actually does relate to Trobe, and Locke's not here because he just had a baby. But when I left this to go over to the US, Locke replaced me as a lecturer at Fed Uni. And then Locke left Fed Uni and came over here, and Fed Uni called me up and they're like, do you want to come back? And I'm like, I wasn't really planning on it for a few more years, but an opportunity like that wasn't going to show up again. So then Locke left and came here, and then I went back. So basically I moved internationally in 12 months, twice in 12 months, just because Locke James wanted to come here. And now I'm here. So it's just that Locke and I have a funny interaction with our careers as they go forward. So that brings me to this. Basically, I'm not a biomechanist. I'm not a physiologist. I'm not a skill acquisition expert. I'm not a data analyst. I am literally a generalist in sports, and I love it. And all you have to do is do a quick look at my Google Scholar profile and look at the last 2 years, and you'll be like, what the hell's going on with this? So, for instance, this is my most recent publication, a community-based modified sport program for rural community-dwelling older adults, a pilot study. The background behind that is this was a master's of clinical exercise physiology students that I was helping supervise. But I was also, because I was involved in basketball in Ballarat, I was running a walking basketball program for older adults in the Ballarat region, just because it just fell into my lap. And then I was like, oh, I kind of enjoy this. And this student was helping me with that. So then we just turned it into a research project for him. Or this is another one that came out last year, is does an increase in supraspinatus tendon thickness after swimming increase the likelihood of future shoulder pain? Big jump from one of those to the other. But then again, this was a local Ballarat swim coach who went through, did her sports science degrees at ACU and QUT, but was living and working in Ballarat, training high-level swimmers, and wanted to do a PhD. So we were looking at the volume intensity of swimming and how that influences shoulder tendon thickness. Or, and this is right up your area, this other one that came out, understanding volunteer motivations and concerns in coaching and officiating basketball implications for policy. So again, this came out of my involvement in sport in Ballarat. I'm the president of a large basketball club, so we've got about 500 young basketball players and 52 coaches that are part of that one club, and that's multiplied across 8 clubs in Ballarat. So there's thousands of kids running around playing basketball and hundreds of coaches in Ballarat. And this all stemmed coming back from COVID and people just not volunteering. So in my club, we went from having very easily being able to find 52 coaches to coach all the teams to all of a sudden I'm coaching 10 teams because nobody else wants to do it. And we were trying to understand why that was happening. So this one, common high-speed running thresholds likely do not correspond to high-speed running in field sports. This is probably more up my alley than the other ones. But this was with Locke and a PhD student of mine and Warren Young's and David Opar's, where we were looking at hamstring strain injury prevention. So we were looking to see if a sprint training and an acceleration training intervention can improve eccentric hamstring strength, sprint speed, as well as muscle fascicle length in Australian rules football players. And as we went through, basically, we were looking to see that the way that sports clubs classify sprinting is not actually sprinting. There's a big difference between running at 80% of max and running at 95 to 100% max. And saying, basically, if you want to prevent hamstring strain injuries, you need to actually sprint at 100% of max to get the adaptations. This one is another student project, but also born from basketball, my basketball links. So we went out and surveyed and interviewed a lot of basketball coaches from all around the world, Olympic basketball coaches here in Australia, college and high school coaches in the US, coaches in the UK, and coaches in Canada, to just try and understand what basketball coaches were looking at or looking for when identifying talented basketball players. No big surprise, they were looking for decision makers and tall, long human beings. So basically it boils down to, are you 7 feet tall? Can you make a good decision? And can you shoot? And if you can do those 3 things, then you can be a basketball player. And then the last one is this pedal quadrant specific strength and conditioning for endurance cyclists. And I wanted to highlight this because Ryan, who is the lead author on this, was, when I was the discipline lead at Fed Uni, part of my job was to get our young academics research active. And he had never published, had PhD, hadn't published anything before. So I worked with him to just say, well, let's take one of your lectures. Take one of your lectures and we'll turn it into a paper to just get it started, and highlighting that there's little things that academics can do to kickstart their publications rather than just going out and conducting a study. So he had some really great thoughts around cycling, and was presenting these at conferences and things like that. I'm like, well, you've done the hard work. All we need to do is just modify it and put it into a format and submit it, and you can get your first publication. So right there, that's last year, essentially in a nutshell, but such a wide range of sport-based research. I'm going to just highlight this quote that Warren, my PhD supervisor, told me on like day one of doing my PhD. He said, well, good research starts with a good question, and a good question comes from a coach. So if you can talk to a coach and you can design questions and studies based upon the feedback that coaches give you, or highlighting what a problem is to a coach, then you know that your research is always going to be impactful to somebody. So what I thought I'd do is highlight 4 studies that are coach-derived that I'm currently working on at the moment. One is related to basketball, one is related to American football, another one is in yachting, and another one is with a coach at a rugby league team. So, project 1. I call this We Can't Shoot. So the background behind this came from a meeting with the head coach, the high performance manager, and the sports scientist from Southeast Melbourne, Phoenix. So the head coach is Mike Kelly here. And the problem is they're the worst shooting team in the league. And the high performance manager said to me in the meeting, he goes, well, first of all, he goes, I don't think we're going to get better by understanding counter movement jump variables or getting stronger or being more agile. We know it's not really our biggest problem and it's not a priority. But I don't think the way we train our shooting is specific to how we shoot in games. And Luke and Claire and all the skill act people probably all over this. But if you've ever watched a basketball training, there's probably one down there, or you'll often see the people put the shooting gun out there and it just fires balls at them and they catch it and they shoot it and they catch it and they shoot it and they just get bulk reps of shooting. Whereas that's not how a shot looks in a game, but this is what they were doing in training. Everything is just bulk, clean reps, catch and release, catch and release. So what I did, along with a very high quality third year student, is I said, well, let's investigate how jump shots are performed in a game, because no one had really done that. There's been some research by like Adam Gorman, who showed that technique changes in the presence of a defender, but nobody's ever looked at the contextual variables of what actually happens in a game when someone takes a jump shot. So I said, let's investigate how jump shots are performed in a game, what contextual factors have the greatest influence on the outcome of the shot. And if we know what a shot attempt looks like in a game, we can then improve the specificity of shooting drills. So I had a third year student. He's a basketball nuts. He's a current basketball coach at a high level. And we did this as a third year capstone project, because all I had to do to him is say, listen, you're going to sit down and watch every jump shot this team took over the course of the season. All right. So you're just going to sit there and watch basketball games and look at what shots look like. And he was all over it. So we sat down with Mike Kelly, so with the coach himself, and we came up with notational analysis coding sheets. Basically, there's all these different categories of variables and then sub variables within them. So for example, screen types, on ball versus off ball screens, pass types, chest pass, bounce pass, overhead pass, single hand pass, the quality of the pass, did it hit their hands or did it hit their feet? Did they have to extend for it? Was there a paint touch prior to the shot? What that means is, does the ball get passed into the paint and then come back out before someone shoots it? All of these things. And the student watched all of it and broke it down, and not a strong suit of mine, David and Andrew, not my strong suit. I'm not a statistician. So I worked with a statistician who did all of this stuff. I have no idea. It's like a different language to me, but I don't know what a random forest classifier with 10,000 trees is. You guys do. I've talked to you about this. But basically, he went through, did all of this to figure out what influenced shot success. So importance factors. So when in the game the shot was taken, what time on the shot clock, the shot location, the number of passes prior to any pre-shot move, all the way down. All right, to look at how important those factors were on whether or not the shot went in. This is just representing when in the shot clock. So if it was early in the shot clock compared to late in the shot clock, or in the middle of the shot clock. And then where on the floor the shot was taken. But I think what's more important than that from my standpoint is, one, from an outcomes, the student who completed the project has then since been brought on board and is now an assistant coach with the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, who's going to be their shot analyst for this coming season. He's actually the current honors student here, where we're doing another project with Phoenix. So that's a positive outcome, one, from that study. Two is because of that and bringing that student on board, Phoenix have modified their shooting drills to be more representative of how they shoot in games. And, the biggest thing that they took from that is, one, the quality of passes. So if you're doing a shooting drill, pass quality is always there, and the coach will always, the pass has to hit the shooter in the hand. That's not how it works. So implementing bad passes prior to a shot and putting defenders in different locations, closing out at different intensities. Real simple stuff to pretty much everyone in this room. That's like, no shit. You should probably be doing that anyways. But as you know, most coaches don't always think about that. And there's a podcast called the Great Coaches Podcast. And the guest last week was Andre Lemanis, who was the Boomers coach for a long time. And he was actually in that interview, he was talking about how Adam Gorman was sitting watching basketball training for the Australian Olympic team and went up to him and said, "Why do you shoot in practice like this? How often in a game does someone just catch a ball and shoot it, catch a ball and shoot it 10 times and then move to another location?" And Andre Lemanis, great basketball coach, goes, "Well, I never actually really thought about it that way until someone said it." So then he decided to change the way that they were shooting. So while it's common sense to us in here, it's often not common sense to the coach. This is being written up and is submitted for review in a journal, which is great. But also it opens up opportunities for future collaboration because the coach saw the relevance of it, created opportunity for the student, creates opportunity for future collaboration. We get a publication out of it, that's great. They don't care that we get a publication out of it, but we do. All right. Project 2. I call this, we want to trial a new test. So background, meeting with the head of sports medicine and the head of sports performance at Yale, their athletic department. Yale is the second richest university in the world. I think they have an endowment of like $140 billion. So resources are not an issue at all. So this is only one of their 5 strength and conditioning rooms there. So every sport has their own, and each of them looks like that. And it's crazy. Here is their football stadium with 120,000 seats in it. So a lot of cool stuff goes on there. But what they have in physical resources, sometimes they're intellectual resources from an athletic department standpoint. There's lots of smart people there, but they're not necessarily their strength and conditioning coaches. So their problem is they want to conduct counter movement jumps and drop jumps for all players on the football team. And bear in mind that there's 90 people, there's 90 student athletes on an American football roster. That's a lot of time to do a counter movement jump and a drop jump, but they don't have time to do that. So as I'm talking to them, I said, well, there is a whole nother jump test that you could do. It's called the rebound counter movement jump. So for those of you that aren't familiar, I'll demonstrate real quick, probably not a drop jump, but counter movement jump, for those of you that don't know, hands go on hips, athlete jumps up as high as they can, right? You get a measurement of, I believe Locke calls it explosive strength. In his diagnostics, I would just call it power. But that's counter movement jump, and then a drop jump, athlete stands on a box, they literally drop down, and then as soon as they hit the ground, they jump back up as high and as fast as they can as a measurement of the reactive strength. So you get their ability to produce power in a long, slow stress shortening cycle and their ability to produce power in a short, fast stress shortening cycle. But the new rebound counter movement jump test, to be more time efficient, combines those into one. So essentially the athlete starts with their hands on their hips, they jump up as high as they can, and then as soon as they hit the force plate, they jump up as fast as they can, as high as they can. It looks like this. All right, so you jump up, and then you hit, and then you jump back up again, and you combine both the long, slow, and the short, fast assessment into one more time-efficient test. So they're like, oh, we're like, well, you could try this out and see if this works, if that's what you want to do. But then the question comes, is it a valid and reliable test of explosive strength and reactive strength? And we don't know, because Bald are putting it out there, Hawking Dynamics are putting it out there, and everybody's like, this is the new jump test that everyone should do. But no one's ever actually looked at it. So I thought, well, why don't we go look at it? We sent 2 honor students placed within the Yale football staff all of last season, and that was their job, to just run football players through jump tests. And what did we find? So basically, from a reliability standpoint, if we break it down into 2 phases. So the first phase of that jump, which mimics a counter movement jump. So the variables I get from that should be the same as what I get from a counter movement jump. Yep, so we had good repeatability, except for time to take off. And as Alana spoke about yesterday, that's a time-based metric. often associated with fatigue. These players were, in their general prep phase, there was some field-based work that they were doing, so it might have been a little bit of fatigue going on there. And then, however, in the second phase, that became more reactive. ICCs went down, coefficients of variation blew up, so not very repeatable in that second phase of the jump. So everything was clean for the first phase, but once they had to hit the ground and jump back up, everything kind of went out the window. And then when we compare from a validity standpoint, if we compare let's say jump height, so this is jump height in a counter movement jump. So the jump height attained in the first phase of the rebound counter movement jump, we had a small but significant 4.8% difference in jump height. And then again, a small but significant 3.4% difference in peak power. So two common variables that a coach would use to monitor training status in an athlete, significantly different between the two jumps. And then when we correlate those variables together, most of them correlate strongly with each other, except for time to take off. And then when we look at the rebound phase of it, significant differences in contact time, jump heights, and reactive strength index. So basically, and I guess just to highlight, so basically from that test, whilst it's time efficient and it might be appealing to a coach might say, oh, this sounds great. I can get these two different tests in one, save me time, save me effort, but reliability and validity are questionable. And if they're going to try and implement that test in practice, there needs to be extensive familiarization. And we didn't measure it, but from a dual tasking standpoint, you're trying to complete two jumps in one. So if you jump up as high as you can, but you're also thinking about your landing and then a subsequent jump, you're trying to process a lot of information in a short period of time. Whereas if you separate them out, you're not, there's not competing demands for the athlete's attention during the test. Submitted that to JSCR last week. Outcome, another positive outcome is students had a great learning experience. They blended research with practical application. And there's also a current Trobe master's student over there at the moment doing, well, as part of an internship, but then they'll also embed that in with their Masters of S&C research project. And then also facilitates opportunity for future collaboration. All right, project number 3, even more different. So a few years back, I was working at Fed Uni, and there was a research center there called the Collaborative Evaluation Research Center, and it's a qualitative-based research group with, I guess it's multidisciplinary. And I was brought on to be a sport person in that research group. But a crew that was entering in the Sydney to Hobart wanted to evaluate their preparation. So the owner of this yacht had an extensive background in business leadership and wanted to form a gender-balanced, psychologically resilient team to enter in the Sydney to Hobart race. So he had this boat, he had dispensable income, and he thought, why not just put a team together and enter into this race? So I was brought on to be part of that research team to add the sport element to it. And it was actually a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to be. So basically, the way we ended up looking at it is this is team selection and development in this unique sports context. And what is even more unique is the owner of the yachts and the crew chief wanted a 50-50 gender balance within the boat. From his business experience, that's what has worked best. You don't want a team of all males. You don't want a team of all females. If you want a high-performing team, you need to have a gender split amongst them. That's unique in any sport. I don't know any other sporting context where you can have that. And then digging into the research, there is like no research into that at all. There's a few studies that have looked at gender combined training environment. So taking a male and female basketball team and training them together to see what happens in terms of team cohesion, things like that. So that's how we approach it. How we're going to follow their selection and their development prior to the city of Hobart. We did pre and post race surveys, pre-race interviews, and post-race interviews. And this was just starting. This was like my first dive into qualitative research. And then this led into that basketball talent development or talent selection project I did. But I realized I love talking to coaches. Right? Talking to coaches is awesome. And if my research can just be sitting down and talking to coaches the whole time, it's badass. All right. So let's think about what we found. So after we did those interviews, we come up with themes. So the theme one that came out from the pre-race interviews was around personal motivations. So one, as I said, the crew chief wanted to have a gender balance. It was extremely important to him for a few different reasons. One of which was actually kind of funny / strange. So he was doing some research and he found that a lot of deaths on boats happen due to drownings because a male crew member will just decide to urinate off the side of the boat and fall in. And he goes, well, we won't have that happen if there's males and females on the boat at the same time. So that was also part of his motivation as well. He didn't want the males on the boats to urinate off the side, fall into the water, and die. And he thought that would be different. Also, it was more about, rather than actually winning their division of the city to Hobart, it was more around having the team come together, gain their competence and their confidence to the C's of coaching. Focusing on an importance of teamwork and creating a positive crew culture. So the motivations were more intrinsic rather than extrinsic motivations. So just some quotes that came out that were, I guess, relevant to this. So I've always supported ladies being on the boats, and I found that having ladies on the boat, they respect the role that they've been given more than men who just think that they should have it. They should give it them. This is another quote. Steep learning curve. I'm on the learning curve. I'm just like a sponge absorbing all the stuff that's going on and the chatter between the crew in terms of, oh, could we do this or could we do that? That sort of stuff, having conversations and seeing things, how we could do things better or quicker is what they really enjoy. Theme two that came out from that is around preparation, managing stress and fatigue. I think Matt's on here as well, which is interesting. Preparing for the unexpected. And preparing for the unexpected. So while they were preparing, it was about the team and bringing the right group together, but then also making sure that they were doing it safely. Because obviously they're in this extreme environment. You want to be able to get off the boats the same way that you got onto it. So if you're out there and it's bucketing down rain and it's blowing a gale, you get cold, you get wet, you can't be out there for very long. And fatigue management is actually one of the most important things on a yacht. The yacht will take care of itself most of the time. It's actually about managing fatigue, which is the most important for safety. I think it's just human intuition, knowing people get really cold or they get sick, their brain isn't functioning, they can't make rational decisions. You know, when someone's not quite right, they've got to recognize that themselves and do the right thing instead of trying to be a hero. So I just thought, interesting little study. I didn't go into it thinking that it was going to be overly relevant to me, but as we got in and we looked at the yacht crew as a team and looked at what was important to them, I was like, this is coaching. This is team development in this really unique sport context. So I loved it. And at the moment, we're writing that up for publication. So that's like a 3-part study that we're submitting. And they won their division, which is pretty cool. So they had, I think only 3 of these people had been in a yacht race before, and they kind of just found good people that were motivated and culturally fit, and they had success. Now, there weren't obviously not a super yacht, but they went out there and accomplished their goal, which is pretty cool. All right, and then the last study project I want to highlight is very recent, and this one is in development. So this comes from Nathan Spencer, who's just a very recently commenced PhD student. He's the head of strength and conditioning at St. George Illawarra in the NRL. Just prior to that, was at N-Swiss as the head of strength and conditioning for water polo. And then prior to that, spent a number of years with the Orlando Magic in the NBA. So he's a very well-credentialed strength and conditioning coach here in Australia. And his question was, how do I mentor developing strength and conditioning coaches? So the problem for him had nothing to do with strength testing or nothing to do with what am I looking at from a variable standpoint or from a programming standpoint. He's interested in helping future strength and conditioning coaches get into the area. And there's not a lot in this space. So we know that established strength and conditioning coaches like Nathan are often contacted by young strength and conditioning coaches like our Masters of S&C students. And they want to have a mentorship. But the problem is nobody knows how to do that in a strength and conditioning coaching context. So if you were to go on the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association website, there's a link that says find a mentor. And it's literally just their email address. And it's email this person if you want to be a mentor. But nothing is provided to the mentee, the potential mentee, and the potential mentor on how to actually do that in strength and conditioning. So what we want to do, is we know that there's research in sports coaching, all right? And in the sports coaching specific context, which is different from strength and conditioning. In strength and conditioning, there's a lot of young coaches that want to crack into the industry, which is different than mentoring somebody who's already in it and looking to move up. How do you get in is different than how do you thrive once you're already in there. So what we want to do with Nathan's PhD is essentially we want to work with strength and conditioning governing bodies all around the world, because every single one of them, the NSCA, the UKSCA, the ASCA, all have these mentorship opportunities. But we want to work with them to develop a toolkit to help guide effective mentor-mentee relationships, specifically in strength and conditioning. So example research questions, what do stakeholders want to achieve through an S&C mentorship? So that's looking at the governing bodies, it's looking at the coaches themselves, that's looking at the young professional who wants to get into it. What's the best way to seek these opportunities? And what structure is most effective? Could it be communities of practice? And I know Morris and Kate have done work in this space. And it's something that obviously came from a coach. He gets contacted a lot. It's a problem for him. Gets lots of emails a week that is just like, be my mentor. And he's like, well, what does that actually mean? I don't know anything about you. I don't know how to help you. How can we actually bring this all together? So it's a different sort of strength and conditioning study, but I think it's what the strength and conditioning industry needs. We can dissect the force time curve so many different ways. We can look at isometric testing and sprinting, which is fantastic. That's great. But there's a whole body of research that I think needs to be done to help move the profession forward. And it's problems like this that can be really impactful. So I guess in conclusion, one, if it has to do with sport, I'm interested in it. If it helps a coach be better at their job, I'm even more interested in it. And if you think I can contribute to something, just ask. I will probably say yes. It's a problem my wife brings up to me all the time. She's like, you gotta say no to things, but I don't, that's just not the way I operate. And I'm 40, I'll be 43 on Sunday. I'm not going to change the way I do things now. I'm literally going to keep doing that. I will say yes to anything. And I'll do anything for a free t-shirt. That's also what she's like, she goes, if somebody offers you a t-shirt with a logo on it, you do it. I said, 100% I'll do it. I'll do anything for a t-shirt with a logo on it.